Hey everybody, and welcome to my video series on verbs. In this video, I want to just quickly talk about the role of verbs. Without verbs, you really don't have a sentence, right? Just a list of words. For example, if I say, the tall boy in the blue jacket, that's just a phrase. It doesn't tell us anything about what's happening or if anything's happening. But if I add a verb to it, so the tall boy in the blue jacket runs, now it's a sentence. Now it's a full clause. And so the verb brought it to life. Verbs are a special type of grammatical unit that are central to sentences in a way that other units, other parts of speech are not. So verbs are the life force of language. They tell us what's happening, what exists, or what changes are taking place. So let's look at the main functions of verbs. A common but misleading characterization is that verbs are simply actions. While it's true that many verbs like kick or run describe actions, there are many others that do not fit this muscular activity idea of action. For example, verbs like fall or sleep don't involve conscious effort, and many verbs are actually stative. So meaning they describe a state rather than an action at all. And these could be verbs like own, like, or be. So for instance, in the sentence, Mary is smart, Mary isn't actually doing anything. She's simply in a state, the state of being smart. So verbs can function in different ways. We have action verbs, which tell us what the subject is doing. She runs every morning. They built a sandcastle. We laughed at the joke. We also have event verbs that show something happened, often without agency, right? So the glass broke. It rained all night. The concert started late. And then we have state verbs, which describe existence or condition rather than action. So he is tired. They are friends, and the book remains interesting. And finally, we have process verbs, which show gradual change over time. So the soup cooled slowly. Leaves turn brown in autumn. Or my phone battery is dying. And so no matter which type of verb we're dealing with, the verb always carries the core meaning of the sentence. And to see what makes verbs special, let's compare them with some other parts of speech. So we have nouns, which name things. For example, dog or table or happiness. And in a sentence like, the dog barked, the noun tells us what the sentence is about. Adjectives, on the other hand, describe nouns. So words like red, tall, or interesting add detail, as in the red, sweet apple, or that red apple is sweet. Adverbs describe how actions happen, using words like quickly, very, or often. For instance, she ran quickly to catch the bus. Now, verbs are different. Verbs make the sentence move. For example, she caught the bus. Verbs are the second most numerous class of words in English, right after nouns. So while nouns, adjectives, and adverbs add information, verbs are really the engine of the sentence. Without them, nothing happens. Now, every sentence, or more specifically a clause, because we're using the word sentence kind of loosely here. So every sentence with quotes in English has two halves, the subject and the predicate. For example, in the dog is sleeping on the couch, the dog is the subject, and is sleeping on the couch is the predicate. The verb is the core of the predicate. Without it, the subject just kind of sits there. So if you compare these examples, the students, that sounds incomplete, right? Versus the students are studying, or the students will take the exam tomorrow. Both of these are complete. And that's why we say no verb, no clause, right? Or no verb, we don't have a sentence. Now in English, every sentence except commands, which I'll mention again in a second, they have to have a subject. So it can sometimes feel like the subject is really more important than the verb, but some languages don't need a subject for a full sentence. English does. So what a verb is conceptually, a verb can be thought of as what is going on in the sentence. Or more technically, the verb is the predicate. That is what is said about the subject. Predication is the central element of a sentence or a clause. And this is why verbs are the most important part of a sentence. In fact, grammatical sentences can sometimes consist of just a verb, like commands such as run or stop. But words like book or yellow can't stand alone as sentences on their own. Now, let's look at three main types of verbs in English. First, we have main verbs, also called lexical verbs, and these are the verbs that carry the main meaning of the sentence. There's also a special group within this category called copular verbs, and I'll cover those at the end today. The second type is auxiliary verbs, informally kind of called helping verbs, because they work alongside the main verb to create different tenses, aspect, or form questions, amongst other things you'll learn in a second. And finally, we have modal verbs, which express things like possibility, necessity, or ability. So we're going to take a look at each of these right now. And let's start with lexical verbs, also called main verbs and also sometimes called full verbs. And these are the verbs that carry meaning all on their own. For example, she sings beautifully. They travel every summer. We watched a movie last night. And in each of these sentences, the main verb, so sings, travel, watched, is what gives the sentence its core meaning. Now, lexical verbs can show tense by themselves. For instance, she sings beautifully is present tense, but she sang beautifully is past. Or we watched a movie every Friday is past, whereas we watch a movie every Friday is present, or a little more complicated than that, but we'll get to it. The key thing to remember is that lexical verbs don't need another verb to make sense. They can stand on their own and still form a complete, meaningful sentence. But let's talk about auxiliary verbs, also called helping verbs. These verbs don't carry the main meaning of a sentence on their own, but they help the main verb form things like questions or negatives or different tenses, different aspects, or even the passive. And if some of these descriptions are going over your head, don't worry, we'll talk about them in the next videos. Now, the three primary auxiliaries in English are the three verbs be, have, and do. So let me show you these three real quick. Because when I say be, have, and do, I'm talking about these and their conjugations. So like all verbs, these auxiliaries change their form depending on the subject, and that process is called conjugation. If you studied Spanish in high school, you're familiar with it, maybe as it relates to other languages like Spanish, but it's also kind of happening in English in its own way. So conjugation in this sense just means how a verb looks when it's matched with a person and number. So for example, the verb be has several present tense forms. I am, you are, he, she, it is, we are, they are. And notice how the verb changes depending on who the subject is. That's conjugation. The same thing happens with have, I have, she has. And with do, they do, he does. So I just want to put a visual to it because if you're a native English speaker, you know each of these forms and uses, but may have not thought about it like consciously, like as conjugation before. So auxiliary verbs always appear alongside a main verb. When the auxiliary is be or have, the main verb appears in its participle form. This is usually the ing form, like I am singing, or they are singing, or the form that shows a completed action, like they are finished, they have finished, or he has finished. So when the auxiliary verb is do, on the other hand, the main verb appears in its bare infinitive form, which just means the basic form of the verb without any endings like s or ed or ing. So for example, we do believe in second chances, or he does believe in second chances, but you wouldn't say we do believed in second chances, or he does believing in second chances, right? Because that's not how that works. Now, auxiliaries are important for forming questions. To make a question, the auxiliary moves to the start of the sentence. So she is singing becomes, is she singing? Or they have finished becomes, have they finished? And main verbs alone can't do this without the support of the auxiliary verb do, right? So auxiliaries also help form negatives. You simply add not after the auxiliary. So I am not going, or she does not believe me. And again, main verbs alone need do, a version of this verb do, to form these negative forms. Now, auxiliaries are also used in the passive voice too. For example, the cake was eaten by the children, or the homework has been finished. And here, be and have show the tense and aspect, while the main verbs eaten or finished, they carry the action, right? So auxiliaries let you show, finally with auxiliaries, they let you show tense and aspects. For example, there's the progressive I am running. So what I'm saying here is we use auxiliary verbs to help with tense and aspect, and we'll get to that, I think, in our next video or the one after. But we have the progressive I am running, the perfect she has finished, and future, where we use the will as an auxiliary modal verb. They will arrive tomorrow. So remember, auxiliaries are the helpers that carry grammatical meaning. Time, they help with tense, time, right? Questions, negatives, forming the passive. And while the main verb carries the core meaning of the sentence. And if you're not familiar again with some of these terms I've used, like tense, aspect, or progressive, like I said, we'll be getting to one of those in the next videos. So now let's talk about modal verbs. So we've talked about main verbs, or lexical verbs, right? We've talked about our auxiliary verbs. And we're going to talk about modal verbs, which are a small but important group of auxiliary verbs. And modal verbs include words like can, may, must, could, should, will, would, might, and shall. And they're used to express things like ability or possibility, necessity, obligation, or intention. So for example, I can swim. She must finish the project. They might visit next week. So a few important things to know about modals is that first, modals don't change form. Like unlike regular verbs, they never take the S or the ED or the ING. So we can say she can swim, but we would never say she cans swim, right? Now, second thing to know is that modals are always followed by the base form of the main verb, sometimes called the bare infinitive. We've used this term already, right? So for example, we can say I must study, but can't say I must studied or I must studying, right? Now, third, modals don't need auxiliary verbs to make questions or negatives. With normal verbs, we often use do, does, or did, right, to form questions like, do you like pizza? But with modals, we just invert the modal for a question. So can you swim? Or add not for a negative, right? So she must not leave yet. And modals can express different meaning, as I mentioned at the beginning. Ability, they can express ability. So I can run fast. Things like possibility. It might rain tomorrow. Necessity or obligation, you must wear a seatbelt, or maybe future intention or prediction, like she will arrive at 5 p.m. Lastly, some modals are used to make requests or suggestions more polite, like could, would, or might. Like could you help me is softer than can you help me. So now we're in pragmatics, right? But we use modals to kind of soften these things for politeness reasons. So remember, modals are special because they help show mood, possibility, necessity, ability, intention, and they always work with the main verb in its base form, right? In its bare infinitive form. Auxiliary verbs and modals, we talked about auxiliaries a second ago, we're on modals now, but both of these together are sometimes called helping verbs because they support the main verb, but they can also stand alone as the main verb in a sentence. For example, I am 35 years old, or I have many books. The auxiliary verb in these examples does the main work here. The main idea is that lexical verbs carry the main meaning of the sentence, while auxiliaries and modals mostly show things like tense, mood, or how the action relates to time. So for instance, I am coming or I have arrived. The auxiliaries am and have show the timing of the action, while the main verb coming and arrived tell us what is happening. So let's look just briefly at something called semi-auxiliaries, and these are verb phrases that work like auxiliaries but are made up of two or more words. They're usually introduced by the be verb or the have verb. So some common auxiliary, semi-auxiliaries are phrases like be going to, have to, be supposed to, be able to, be about to, be due to, be likely to, be bound to. Using these as a couple sentences, I'm going to study tonight. She has to leave early, or he is supposed to call his mother. And semi-auxiliaries, they function very much like regular auxiliaries. They help the main verb show tense or, intention, future events, obligation, and all those things, just like auxiliaries and modals do. The difference is that they always have multi-word phrases rather than single words. So we've covered auxiliaries, we've covered modals, and we've covered semi-auxiliaries. And before that, we talked about main verbs. So we're going to circle back to main verbs real quick because I mentioned earlier this thing called copular verbs, also known as linking verbs. So this is a little special case we want to talk about, or special class. So unlike most verbs, copular verbs don't show action. Instead, they link the subject to more information about the subject. This extra information is called the complement. It's the part of the sentence that tells us something about the subject. Common copular verbs include verbs like be, seem, become, appear, look, and remain. So, for example, she is a teacher. A teacher is the complement because it tells us what she is. And is the copular verb. What about he became nervous before the exam? Nervous is the complement because it tells us about him, he, right? And became is the copular verb. So copular verbs they're interesting because some auxiliaries like be, the verb be, can act as copular verbs when they occur by themselves. For example, I am Popeye, the sailor man. Am is a copular verb linking the subject to more information. But when the same verb occurs with another verb, like in I am singing, it acts as an auxiliary helping the main verb, right? So we don't necessarily keep some of these verbs in one particular class. They have some of them, like the be verb, have this movability depending on what it's functioning as in the sentence. So remember, copular verbs link the subject to a complement. We'll learn about that phrase again more a little later when we talk about verb valency. But it's just the part, the complement is just the part of the sentence that tells us about the subject instead of showing an action. So now that we've looked at different types of verbs, let's turn our attention to the morphology of a verb. And that is like all the ways verbs can change form to show different meanings. And verbs can have several categories that describe them. So we have tense, which show when the action happens, like, past or present. We have person, which indicates who is doing the action. And we use phrases like first person or second person or third person. Number shows whether the subject is singular or plural, right? If there's one person or if there's more than one person. And I keep using person, but we could also be talking about cats, right? Whether there's one cat or there's multiple cats. Aspect tells us about the type of action, like whether it's progressive, habitual, or perfect, or others. And we'll learn more about aspect a little later. And then finally, voice tells us whether the subject is doing the action, and it's an active voice, or the subject is receiving the action, which is passive voice. So to bring most of this together really quickly, in the sentence, I sing in the choir, the verb sing is first person, because the subject is I. It's singular, it's present tense, it's habitual, and it's an active voice, right? So this is a fun way that we get to learn how to digest verbs. Now, a quick note, we're just giving you a sneak peek at these categories. We're going to go into all of these in much more detail in the next videos, including how verbs change, for how they change form for tense, aspect, and voice. It's important to note that not all verbs have tense. So for example, in Shakespeare's famous line, to be or not to be, that is the question, the infinitive to be is not tensed. We'll learn more about that soon. Woo! In short, though, verbs are central to the meaning and structure in English. They can stand alone or they can work with helpers. They can link the subject to extra information, and they even carry subtle grammatical meanings like mood, time, and obligation. And now that we understand what verbs are and the roles they play, the next step is learning how verbs change form. So that's where inflections, tense, and aspect, and more come in, and we'll cover those in the next videos.